Don't do it again. We are the counter-revolution. It's not going anywhere, mate. Everyone's had enough.
The Islamification of Europe is going to eradicate us.
I witnessed my friends die for this green and pleasant land, and we are here to take it back.
The police have now entered into the crowd. An uprising is set to take place here in the United Kingdom. Some may even say it is the beginning of a revolution. As freedom of speech is underneath attack here, millions of people are here out in the streets of the United Kingdom to take back their country and get their speech back. And the leader of this rally is Tommy Robinson here in the United Kingdom, and let's go meet with him right now. To what extent will the people let freedom of speech be attacked here in the United Kingdom?
They've allowed it to be attacked for 20 to 30 years. This is the spark of a cultural revolution where the public are saying no more. We're fed up of your hate speech laws. We're fed because hate speech laws aren't used against everyone. They're used against British people, and they're used to try and silence us and stop us criticising government failure. That's what they're used for, or speaking out about the crimes by people imported into our nation by globalist agendas. So we want to be free to speak. You know, there's an Islamophobia bill that this government are trying to pass. If they're successful, we won't be able to tell the world about the rape of our daughters by Muslim gangs. It will prevent us even speaking about it. There is no free speech, just so Americans understand. There's only one place in the world that has free speech, it's the United States of America, and there's only some people who are fighting for our free speech, and none of them are in our parliament. It's J.D. Vance, it's Donald Trump, and it's Elon Musk. They are fighting for our freedom. When you voted for Donald Trump's election, you didn't vote to save America, you voted to save the West. We only have a fighting chance, and do you know, hope is contagious. What you're going to see today is going to instill hope across every European citizen. We're under attack, Christianity's under attack, we're being replaced, and we're being made to shut up whilst it happens.
This will go down as one of the largest rallies in the history of the United Kingdom, potentially the largest. And yes, and just a few days ago was the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and what you guys are doing here is going to open the mic of millions of people, not only here.
Charlie Kirk said, follow courage, and he has inspired a generation, and in his death, he is going to continue to inspire a generation. You will see a beautiful moment today where we honour his life.
The streets of London have turned into a battlefield of words, power and defiance. What began as a protest has erupted into a national crisis. At the centre of it all, two names dominate the chaos: Keir Starmer and Tommy Robinson. Robinson, known for stirring controversy, has now placed himself at the head of a movement that claims Britain is being stolen from its own people. Starmer, on the other hand, is scrambling to hold the government together, facing not just Robinson's fury, but also Elon Musk's shocking intervention that has left the political establishment shaken to its core. What unfolded at the Unite the Kingdom protest has already been called the most explosive moment in British politics this year, a moment where thousands demanded change and where words of rebellion echoed louder than the Prime Minister's own authority. It started like any other demonstration, but the scale and tone quickly set it apart. The Unite the Kingdom march drew tens of thousands into the heart of London, an unstoppable tide of people who believe their freedoms are slipping away. Placards reading, "Take back Britain," and chants demanding change shook the streets as Tommy Robinson took to the stage, a figure loved by his supporters and despised by his critics. But it wasn't just Robinson's presence that electrified the crowd. It was his defiance, his refusal to bow to Keir Starmer's government, and the thunderous response from those who had come to stand with him. When Robinson began speaking, he directed his anger squarely at Starmer. In front of the roaring crowd, he accused the Prime Minister of betraying Britain, of silencing free speech, of bowing to global elites instead of protecting the working class. Robinson didn't just attack Starmer's policies, he went for his character, painting him as weak, disconnected and unfit to lead. His words were harsh, uncompromising and designed to humiliate, and they worked. Clips of his speech have already gone viral, with millions of views pouring in within hours. The image of Robinson tearing into Starmer has become a rallying point, not just for his supporters, but for anyone who feels betrayed by the political class. Then came the shock that turned a protest into an international scandal. Suddenly, the giant screens lit up and Elon Musk appeared via video link. No one had expected one of the world's most powerful billionaires to insert himself into a British protest, but Musk's message was clear and incendiary. He told the crowd that Britain needed nothing less than the dissolution of Parliament. He spoke of fighting back, of refusing to be silenced, of changing the government itself. His words were met with thunderous applause, but inside the halls of power, panic erupted. A foreign billionaire was calling for rebellion against the British government, and the Prime Minister himself was the target. Keir Starmer's allies immediately branded the speech disgusting and dangerous. Labour sources moved quickly to condemn Musk, claiming that no politician who values democracy should associate themselves with such rhetoric. Yet the damage had already been done. Musk's words gave Robinson's movement global attention, catapulting it from a domestic protest into international headlines. Suddenly, what looked like another march through London had become the story of the week, with calls for sanctions on Musk echoing from politicians across the spectrum. But that was not the only crisis Starmer faced that night. Amid the chaos, violence broke out. Police reported that 26 officers were injured, 4 of them seriously. 24 arrests were made as clashes between protesters and law enforcement spilled across central London. Starmer now finds himself trapped in a storm, accused of losing control of the streets, mocked by Robinson before millions online, and forced to confront the fact that Elon Musk has now turned into a political adversary. The most chilling moment, however, came not from Robinson or Musk, but from an anonymous protester whose words have spread like wildfire. In a video now being investigated by police, a man was recorded calling for the assassination of Keir Starmer. His words were blunt, terrifying, and dangerous. Keir Starmer needs to be assassinated. Someone needs to shoot Keir Starmer. Those chilling remarks have pushed the crisis into a darker and far more serious place. Authorities are hunting the man responsible, but the fact remains, this is no longer just about protests. Starmer's safety and perhaps the stability of the government itself is now in question. In just one day, London became the stage for a revolution in the making. Robinson humiliated the Prime Minister before the eyes of the world. Musk's intervention sparked a political scandal unlike anything Britain has seen in years. And threats against Starmer himself have shaken the very core of Westminster. The question now hangs heavy over the nation. Is this just the beginning of something much larger? The fallout from the United Kingdom protest did not end with the crowds dispersing into the London night. It only intensified. In the hours that followed, Keir Starmer's government scrambled to regain control of the narrative. Ministers lined up on television, each one repeating the same words: disgusting, dangerous, unacceptable. But repetition does not equal authority, and for many watching at home, it felt like the Prime Minister had lost his grip. Tommy Robinson's fiery words and Elon Musk's shocking intervention had already overshadowed every carefully crafted government statement. It was not Starmer who looked strong in that moment, it was his critics. Robinson's performance at the protest was not accidental. He knew exactly where to hit Starmer, and he chose the areas that resonate most with ordinary people. He spoke of broken promises on immigration, of rising taxes that leave working families struggling, and of freedoms that seem to be shrinking with every new law passed in Westminster. For Robinson's supporters, these are not abstract policies, they are daily realities. And when Robinson shouted that Starmer was selling out the British people, the crowd roared because it was already how they felt. His words became a mirror reflecting the frustrations of thousands, frustrations that mainstream politicians have repeatedly ignored. But what shocked Westminster even more than Robinson's accusations was Elon Musk's involvement. Never before had such a powerful outsider spoken so bluntly against a sitting British Prime Minister. Musk's call for the dissolution of Parliament wasn't just rhetoric, it was a direct challenge to Starmer's legitimacy. It was as if the world's most influential tech mogul had declared war on the British political establishment, and Starmer was his chosen target. For many in the government, this was unthinkable, that one man sitting thousands of miles away could destabilise the entire political order with just a few sentences broadcast over a screen. And yet Musk's words struck a chord with people who already felt silenced. His warning, either fight back or you die, was extreme, but to many it echoed the desperation of citizens who believe their government no longer listens. Suddenly, this was no longer just Tommy Robinson's movement, it had Musk's global platform behind it. The hashtag #TakeBackBritain trended for hours on X, with millions engaging in furious debates, some praising Musk for his courage, others demanding his immediate sanction. The digital battlefield had become just as intense as the physical one. Inside Downing Street, panic spread. Keir Starmer called an emergency meeting with his closest advisors. Reports suggest he was furious, demanding answers on how such a massive protest was allowed to spiral out of control. Some of his aides urged him to focus on security, especially after the video of a protester calling for his assassination went viral. Others insisted he should turn his full attention toward Musk, framing him as a reckless billionaire meddling in British democracy. But the truth was impossible to ignore. Starmer was fighting fires on every front, and none of them seemed under control. The police investigation into the assassination threat only added to the sense of crisis. Detectives admitted they were aware of the video, but had yet to make any arrests. The public demanded answers. How could such a blatant threat go unanswered? For Starmer, the optics were disastrous. A prime minister being openly threatened with death while the authorities appeared powerless to act. It made him look weak, vulnerable, even unsafe in his own country. Every headline amplified the same message. Chaos was winning and Starmer was losing. Meanwhile, Robinson wasted no time capitalising on his momentum. He gave interviews declaring victory, mocking Starmer for hiding behind the police and celebrating the size of the crowd that gathered in his name. To his supporters, Robinson wasn't just a speaker. He was a symbol of defiance, a man unafraid to say what millions were thinking. The government, he argued, was terrified of the truth, and that was why they wanted to silence both him and Musk. Whether one agreed with him or not, his words resonated because they cut through the polished, scripted lines of politicians and spoke directly to raw anger. For Starmer, the humiliation was unbearable. A prime minister who should be projecting strength was instead being ridiculed by his rivals, undermined by a billionaire from across the Atlantic, and threatened by people marching through his capital city. Even his allies could sense the danger. One Labour source admitted privately that Musk's words were a nightmare because they gave Robinson's protest international legitimacy. Another warned that if the Prime Minister did not find a way to reassert control soon, the protests would only grow larger and more dangerous. And yet the most haunting question remains unanswered. Is this the beginning of something bigger? The Unite the Kingdom protest might have been just one day in London, but the forces it unleashed are not going away. Anger is building. The opposition is growing louder, and the Prime Minister is finding himself cornered, fighting enemies on all sides. For Britain, this is no longer politics as usual. This is a storm that threatens to sweep away the very foundations of government. Britain was no longer debating whether this was just another march. It was confronting the possibility that the Unite the Kingdom rally had sparked something far more dangerous. The shockwaves continued to spread, rattling not only Westminster, but also Britain's standing on the world stage. News outlets across Europe and America carried headlines about Elon Musk's involvement, with commentators warning that his words were more than reckless. They were destabilising. The Prime Minister's office attempted to regain control, but every new statement from Keir Starmer seemed to fall flat, drowned out by the noise of outrage, defiance and ridicule. For Starmer, the humiliation was personal. Robinson's speech had gone viral across every platform, a brutal takedown replayed millions of times. Clips of him mocking the Prime Minister, calling him a man with no backbone, were being remixed, shared and turned into slogans. Even those who did not support Robinson found themselves watching the clips simply because they dominated the internet. The visual of a furious crowd cheering as Starmer was torn apart in words was a political nightmare, one impossible to erase. Worse still, Musk's intervention was now being framed as a turning point. Proof that Britain's leadership had become so weak that even global billionaires felt emboldened to attack it publicly. Inside Parliament, the mood was toxic. Opposition MPs seized the chance to pile pressure on Starmer, accusing him of losing control of the streets and failing to protect democracy. The Conservative benches erupted with accusations of incompetence, with Nigel Farage using his platform to call the Prime Minister the most out-of-touch leader Britain has seen in decades. Even within Labour, murmurs of doubt began to spread. Could Starmer survive this storm, or was he already too damaged? Every whisper of dissent chipped away at his authority. But while the political class traded blows in Westminster, the streets told a different story. Anger was still simmering. Supporters of Robinson vowed to return, promising larger rallies in the coming weeks. The assassination threat against Starmer, though condemned by all sides, had emboldened fringe elements who now saw themselves as soldiers in a growing rebellion. Police resources were stretched thin, with intelligence units scrambling to track down extremist voices online before they could turn into real-world violence. The sense of danger was everywhere, on the streets, in the media, and within the walls of government itself. Elon Musk, meanwhile, remained unrepentant. Instead of retreating, he doubled down on his remarks, using his own platform to mock the calls for sanctions against him. In a series of posts, he argued that truth should never be silenced and accused British politicians of being afraid of their own people. His defiance inflamed the crisis further, turning what might have been a one-off scandal into a prolonged international standoff. Every tweet Musk sent was treated like a fresh wound to the Prime Minister's reputation, each one amplifying the perception that Starmer was powerless to respond. The debate over sanctions grew louder. Sir Ed Davey of the Liberal Democrats urged immediate action, while senior Tories warned that Musk's interference represented a threat to British sovereignty. Yet, for all the talk, no one seemed willing to take the first step. To punish Musk could risk backlash from millions who now saw him as a champion of free speech. To ignore him would only make Starmer look weaker. Trapped between two impossible choices, the Prime Minister hesitated, and in politics, hesitation is fatal. As the crisis deepened, Robinson's supporters pushed a new narrative that Britain was on the brink of a revolution. Hashtags like hashtag UK Revolution and hashtag Starmer Out surged across social media, painting the protest not as a one-off event, but as the beginning of a movement. Memes comparing Robinson to a warrior standing against a corrupt establishment circulated widely. The internet had turned political rage into a cultural phenomenon, one that politicians could not control. For many ordinary citizens, this was no longer about left versus right. It was about power, freedom, and who really spoke for the people. The danger for Starmer was clear. He was being outflanked not only by Robinson, but also by Musk, Farage, and even sections of his own party. He was Prime Minister in name, but the momentum was no longer his. In politics, perception is everything, and the perception now was of a leader under siege, isolated, and overwhelmed. The longer this narrative spread, the harder it would be to reverse. Britain was sliding into uncharted territory where protests felt like revolts, political speeches sounded like declarations of war, and the authority of the government seemed weaker by the day. And hanging over it all was the most haunting question yet. If this was only the beginning, what would the next protest bring? Would the anger explode further, or would it collapse under its own chaos? The answer would determine not just Keir Starmer's fate, but perhaps the future of Britain itself. The Unite the Kingdom protest had started as a march, but by the time the dust settled, it had become something far larger. Something that Britain's ruling elite could no longer dismiss as just noise. It was the spark that lit a fire across the nation, and now that fire was spreading into every corner of public life. Keir Starmer, once positioned as the steady hand guiding Britain through turbulent times, now looked like a Prime Minister clinging desperately to control. Every day brought fresh humiliation, more viral clips of Robinson mocking him, more pressure from MPs demanding action, more fury from ordinary people who felt betrayed. Starmer's strategy was collapsing. His attempt to frame Musk's comments as disgusting had backfired, making him appear more concerned with silencing critics than addressing the frustrations of the crowd. Instead of looking strong, he looked frightened, afraid of Robinson, afraid of Musk, and even afraid of his own people. Each statement he gave seemed to dig him deeper into the hole, reinforcing the image of a leader detached from reality. The public was no longer listening to his promises, they were watching his failures play out in real time. Robinson, on the other hand, seized the moment with calculated precision. He framed himself as the voice of the people, the only one brave enough to confront Starmer's government directly. To his supporters, he had humiliated the Prime Minister not just in words, but in spirit, cutting through the carefully polished image that Labour had worked so hard to create. He declared that the protests would not stop until Britain was taken back for its people. And judging by the momentum online, millions were listening. The movement had evolved from anger to defiance, and from defiance to something that looked dangerously close to revolution. The most terrifying development for Starmer, however, came not from Robinson or Musk, but from the streets themselves. The assassination threat that surfaced during the rally had opened a door that could not easily be closed. The idea of targeting a prime minister, once unthinkable, was now being whispered in dark corners of the internet. Intelligence officials warned of lone actors inspired by the chaos, ready to turn rhetoric into violence. For Starmer, this was no longer a political battle. It was a fight for his own safety. His public appearances were cut back, his security was doubled, and whispers inside Westminster suggested that his team feared a direct attempt on his life. The pressure from within Labour was equally relentless. MPs worried that Starmer's weakness was dragging the party down. Some quietly suggested he step aside for the good of the government, while others warned that an early election could wipe Labour out entirely if the anger in the streets continued to grow. For a leader who had worked for years to climb to the top, it was a devastating reversal. One moment he was the man in charge, the next he was the man everyone blamed. Meanwhile, Musk continued to escalate. Each time Starmer demanded sanctions, Musk responded with scorn, portraying himself as a martyr of free speech. His words, though reckless, resonated with those who saw themselves silenced by the establishment. To them, Musk wasn't just a billionaire, he was proof that even the most powerful could stand against Starmer. The Prime Minister's obsession with punishing him only fueled the perception that he was weak and desperate, chasing an enemy he could not touch. By now, the headlines told a grim story. Starmer under siege, Musk defiant, Robinson rises, Britain in crisis. The nation was no longer discussing policy or progress, it was discussing survival. And in that brutal environment, perception was reality. Every move Starmer made was scrutinised, every word ridiculed, every hesitation magnified. He was a leader surrounded by enemies, with fewer allies by the day. And so the question lingers heavier than ever. Is this the end of Keir Starmer's premiership? His authority shattered, his safety threatened, his government crumbling, and his people turning against him. It feels less like a question of if he will fall and more like when. Britain has entered uncharted waters where protests blur into uprisings and leaders can be humiliated in front of millions. The Unite the Kingdom March may be remembered not as a protest, but as the beginning of a revolution. And if that revolution grows, then history may say that the night Tommy Robinson and Elon Musk humiliated Keir Starmer was the night Britain itself changed forever.